They still are looking for records, and they don't know when the searches are going to be complete. In fact, it could take as long as 4 years to search for records about what the CIA was doing at the Capitol on January 6th. Another January, well, this is January 6th week at Judicial Watch, I guess. We have a separate lawsuit following up on what I think was a pretty astonishing disclosure we forced out of the government through another lawsuit about the CIA being around on January 6th. You heard me. The CIA had people there on January 6th. Let me show you what the material shows. Judicial Watch. Records show CIA deployed bomb techs, dog teams to D.C. on January 6th. So we filed this lawsuit against the ATF for records about January 6th. We got the material on, when did we file that lawsuit? So we asked for the ATF records back in April 2023, and they actually gave us some records relatively quickly in terms of government time. It was within a year or so. Thanks to the lawsuit. It wasn't like it was voluntary disclosure. But the Biden administration fessed up that there were CIA people around on January 6th. And as we disclosed in the initial release, there was this January 7th intel chain, looked like an ATF chain, in which two separate references to participation by the CIA are made. One states that 2 CIA bomb techs were assisting with a pipe bomb scene in New Jersey and D Street Southeast. So you had the CIA deployed in a law enforcement capacity here in the United States. And then secondly, there were several CIA dog teams on standby. Drone reported a southwest region of the Capitol. In response, 7 NGA dog teams, 2 TF, and several CIA dog teams on standby. So we want to know more about what the CIA was doing. I mean, it could have been completely normal and innocent, and this is what the sort of support they're authorized to give. Of course, no one's asking any questions other than Judicial Watch about the CIA being present at the Capitol on January 6th and being ready to take action. I mean, is the CIA training to take law enforcement action against U.S. citizens? I didn't think that was something they were supposed to be doing. Maybe there's a legal process that allows them to do that. So that's why we asked more questions. We wanted questions about what the CIA was doing on January 6th. Tell us about these bomb techs. Tell us about these dog teams. Tell us about anything else you were doing on January 6th. So we filed one lawsuit, found records about the CIA involvement in January 6th, involvement that would never have been disclosed, or it was only disclosed thanks to Judicial Watch litigation. No one followed up on it, as best I can tell, other than Judicial Watch. So we asked for records from the CIA. They gave us the proverbial hand to the face. No, you can't get anything, and they basically ignored us. So we sued. Yeah, we sued a few months after we uncovered that the CIA was at Congress, or excuse me, at the Capitol on January 6th. And that was in August of 2024. So last month, they tell us essentially that they still are looking for records, and they don't know when the searches are going to be complete. In fact, it could take as long as 4 years to search for records about what the CIA was doing at the Capitol on January 6th. I'll say it one more time. The CIA told a federal court they may need up to 48 months to complete the search of records about what the CIA knew about January 6th and what it was doing in the U.S. Capitol or at the U.S. Capitol, why CIA personnel were there or about to be deployed there. And here's the proof. Now some people, I know, God love you, I come on and say certain things and you're like, well, I don't believe it because I don't see any records. Well, you know, first of all, I'm talking, so I'm not showing you records. But here are the records for those of you who who don't have faith. So this is what is called a joint status report. I'm not a lawyer, but I'll describe what happens in courts from time to time, especially when there's like an ongoing case, like a FOIA case that takes, you know, as I see it, up forever and a day from my perspective. The court wants to be apprised. What's going on here? And so the parties file what is known as a joint status report. So the plaintiff, which is Judicial Watch corporately, and the defendant, in this case, is the Central Intelligence Agency, files a, this is where things stand, and the plaintiffs say this is where things stand from our perspective, and the defendant says where the things stand from their perspective. So this is what they say. Since September 5th, 2025, a significant volume of potentially responsive materials has been returned, causing the responsive review to take significantly longer than anticipated. Based on the review, this is the key, defendant has conducted thus far, and the documents defendant has reviewed to date, defendant estimates it will take an additional 48 months to complete the responsiveness search. So when they say it takes 48 months to complete the search, that means they're done searching. It doesn't explain when we're going to get the documents. It doesn't explain it at all. And then they say, as a way to accelerate the search process, defendant is amenable to working with plaintiff to reduce the number of potentially responsive records by excluding categories of records that, while potentially responsive, may not be the types of records plaintiff seeks. Well, that's, you know, come on. We do that all the time with agencies. Everyone thinks Judicial Watch goes in and, you know, we don't try to cut to the chase and get the records that we think are going to be most important, and don't let the government pretend that the search is so overwhelming they can't do anything. We don't give them that excuse. We try to figure out ways to cut to the chase, as I said, and get the documents. So, for example, we don't necessarily want, you know, to say, well, there are newspaper stories. Do you want stories that are press office gathered? You know, things like that. We may say, don't worry about that for now. So this is what our response is, and I think it's important you see our response to understand the disingenuous nature of these government deep state lawyers in responding to Judicial Watch's FOIA lawsuits. And by the way, these are lawyers, so it's a twofer, right? So you've got the senior leadership of the CIA ultimately responsible for this, and then the senior leadership of the Justice Department ultimately responsible for this, because the CIA is represented by Justice Department attorneys in FOIA lawsuits. So it's Judicial Watch versus the CIA and Justice Department in federal court right now. Defendant has failed to provide, defendant being the CIA, the fulsome description of its efforts ordered by the court. Defendant has not explained why its search is not complete or when it expects the search to be complete. It has offered no specifics as to the number of records located, the number of records reviewed, the rate at which defendant CIA is reviewing records, or when records might actually be produced. In short, no information has been offered to suggest that any progress whatsoever has been made in responding to our request. So we will propose filing a joint status report in March to figure out where we are in March. And what did the court do in response to this joint status report? Really nothing much. The court ordered the parties to inform the court in the next scheduled joint status report about the status of the production and any efforts to reduce the number of potentially responsive records in order to focus on the types of records. Yeah, it is, yeah. So Judge Cobb essentially doesn't want to have a status conference. She just wants another report. And I wish the courts would be more persistent with getting these agencies to respond. But this is the frustration I have as president of Judicial Watch. You know, the Trump administration, you would think, would want to get this information out. But what happens is we file these FOIA requests. the leadership of the agencies don't put a priority on responding to these requests for transparency on scandals that they tell us they're concerned about, and we end up fighting them in federal court. Why on earth is Judicial Watch having, it's one thing to go into court just to kind of get attention made. That I understand is going to happen no matter who's in office. But once we're in court, why is it we continue getting the runaround from this Justice Department and the agencies it defends? We're getting the runaround from the FBI on key documents. We're getting the runaround from the Justice Department on key documents, from the CIA on key documents, from HHS on key documents, on issues that you care about, issues that I know President Trump cares about. And in my experiences, Trump wants to be transparent on this stuff. But there's always an excuse from the deep state, always an excuse from some of the appointees as to why they can't be transparent. As the law requires, we're not asking them to do anything special. We're saying follow FOIA law. So it's frustrating, but I want you to know that the CIA was at the Capitol on January 6th in some form or fashion, was prepared to deploy additional assets to the Capitol on January 6th, and rather than tell us what the heck was going on, given that extraordinary development and information, they're telling us that they need 4 years to tell us what went on. And then some. So we have a joint status report in March. Hopefully we'll get some more information there. But, you know, I can complain about the court not doing what I think the court should do. But in the end, with FOIA, it's usually the agencies that are the problem. I mean, we shouldn't even have to be in court. We shouldn't even have to be in court. I mean, it's one thing to go into court against the Biden administration on issues. You understand why the Biden administration might not want this out, but then have this defended by the Trump administration, by President Trump's appointees. If I were President Trump, I'd get on the horn and say, what the heck is going on with you people? Get these documents out to Judicial Watch and the American people. They have a right to know, and I want them to know. Because as President Trump highlighted, we've been fed a lot of big lies about January 6th. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.